But what if that history was skewed? What if somebody, the winner, Pale King who's still awake, had said, oh yeah, she wants this. This was the bargain we made. Because we know at one point there was a bargain made between Hera and the Pale King to let them in, and then she killed everyone there. So, I started looking. And I went to real world examples. And it really did not take me that long, because I've already written about something that's very similar to what may have happened in Deepnest. And guys, if you're just joining in now, get ready. This is the speculation side of things. You're going to want to watch this from the beginning so you can see all of the clues that have led us up to the betrayal between Hera and the Pale King, and then how the Pale King lies to us and betrays Hera. Betrays Deepnest. Put the beer down for a second. So like I said, guys, I am going to butcher these names, okay? And I want you to walk along with me as to how I got there, okay? There's some things in Deepnest that line up, not perfectly, but they line up really well with our story and with nature itself. So, the very first thing I started looking at when we got into Deepnest were obviously the locations. And I started looking at who all was there still and what all it meant. One of the interesting people that live in Deepnest are corpse creepers. And we've all seen this son of a bitch. You kill a husk, and that husk shakes, and then that son of a bitch sprouts horns and feet. It gets back up and it comes at you. The Hunter's Journal refers to them as parasites. And anytime I hear parasites, I automatically think back to my look deeper with Vespa. Because Vespa, I've tried to show, was not a bee. She's actually a parasitoidal wasp. But I missed something. And I missed some huge clues in that look deeper. Because I only looked at Vespa. I didn't look at anybody else. Because I was concentrated on Hive. But if we stick to this parasitoidal wasp, and I go back to those notes, I start to see some really alarming trends that match somebody else in our story. But that corpse creeper, I had to look at, what's inside this thing. We know it's something. We can obviously look at cordyceps. Cordyceps are a fungus that infects them and infects insects, mainly ants, grows up out of them, controls the ant's brain. But it doesn't quite hit a fungus. Now, Deepnest was at war with fungal waste, and we know this from the lore tablet. And that lore tablet basically says that, hey, those creeping, crawling things, we're going to make no peace with them. So we know they were at war then. But that doesn't fit here. Cordyceps don't fit. So I started looking for things that did fit. And I am going to butcher this name. It is Dicrocolium dendricum. And it's an organism that turns ants into zombies. But it wasn't just any organism. This particular organism we can kind of find in game, because this organism is a real life fluke. And we just established that flukes are actually here as carver hatchers. So what if these flukes were put here as patrols. They're hidden pretty well. They're in unsuspecting creatures. They're in husk. Horned husk, I believe. Nobody would suspect that an agent from the Pale King is now here. But yet here they are. And that got me thinking, what else? What else could be here that the Pale King put? What else could be here from his betrayal? Because if somebody welcomes you with open arms and allows you into their home and then stabs you in the back and kills all of your people, ruins all of the technology you put in, you're going to do something about it, especially if you're a king. And so I started to look at the Pale King. And we don't know what the Pale King is. So I started to look at the other monarchs to maybe figure out how they would do it. And of course I went to Vespa. Because I've done a write-up of her, I've got a lot of information. And then somewhere buried in my notes, I found something that fit our white Pale King just a little too convenient. A little too well. It's too well to be a coincidence. There's another parasitoidal wasp. That parasitoidal wasp is known as a crown wasp. Okay, Pale King does have a fucking crown. That is interesting. So I kind of looked at Pale King references. Not much there. I mean, yeah, he's shed his skin, and he's literally been hatched out of an egg, but nothing big. But then I realized that crown wasp, they look very similar to their larval form. And the Pale King's, what we'll call worm or larval form, does still have his crown. Same way crown wasps do. And that worked out really well. But the Pale King doesn't have wings. And wasp, wait. Yes, he does. Because if we go to the Wanderer's Journal, we actually know that the monarch wings are only used by two people in our story. Us and the Pale King. In fact, those monarch wings are said to be from a monarch fly. Sweet. So a monarch fly. So he's not quite a wasp, but he's sharing a lot of tendencies and a lot of commonalities with parasitoidal wasp. So I said, hey, is there anything else I can build this off of? Because that's pretty fucking sketchy. So I started looking at wasp, and of course you run into your classics, your paper wasps, your hornets, and then something started to dawn on me. Hornet. His kid's literally named after a wasp. And of course we all took this from Vespa naming her, but that was an unused idea. But they still stuck with the name Hornet. Okay, sweet, so there's that. But there's nothing really else until you look at the Pale Lady. And where is the Pale Lady? Pale Lady is in the Queen's Gardens. And in her garden, she is in a giant wasp nest. She is literally cocooned in a wasp nest. That little hole is where you come in and out. So if you go and you look up wasp nest, you're going to see exactly what the the White Lady's in. Pale King has trapped her there. Then I started thinking back to Hera again, because we're in Deepnest, right? And Hera doesn't have any guards. And Hera's betrayed the Pale King. So how would the Pale King retaliate? And how would you still get Hornet out of all of this if you've got a betrayal first? And then I started looking at a couple different things. Parasitoidal wasp. I started to look at different species and try and figure out a little more about them. And again, guys, like I said, I'm going to butcher these names, so I apologize. But we ran into Glypatatelicus. I have no fucking clue, but it's that name twice. Like I said, I will put all of these down in the comments because these guys are really cool, and all of these are in real life. But this is a wasp that uses caterpillars as a host. They lay their eggs inside of caterpillars, and then the larvae hatch and they burrow their way out as the caterpillar is trapped. Because the larvae, while they have mouths to eat their way out, they also secrete chemicals that more or less paralyze the caterpillar. It can still move its legs and move its head a little bit, but for the most part, it really can't move. And that didn't fit anything till we go over to another part of our game. And we go over to Kingdom's Edge. And we look right where the Pale King was more or less born, died and was born again. And we find something that's really interesting, and it's a giant fucking caterpillar. We find Bardoon, and somehow Bardoon has some amazing insight on the Pale King. Knows all about the dude. But Bardoon's fucking huge. Bardoon's fucking huge. And so I started to look more into this parasitoid wasp. And I found out that these caterpillars go on a binge, and they put on so much weight. Larvals and the eggs actually secrete a chemical that makes the caterpillar non-stop eat. And it's non-stop eating so that it can put on fat, because those larvae are now feeding off the fat. They're really careful not to touch any vital organs. They feed off the fat. And this is really important. When the time comes, those larvae eat their way out of the caterpillar. And the caterpillar, like I said, is immobile. It's paralyzed. It can't go anywhere until those larvae are out. And then the caterpillar is kind of a caterpillar, except something's changed. Whatever these wasps have done, and I found kind of conflicting reviews on this one, not reviews, reports on this one. And so for the most part, I'm just going to say like, hey, we're not quite sure why. But this caterpillar, once those larvae are out, and maybe Bardoon still has these larvae in him because he's pretty fucking big, but it sticks around. And it does something really unique, and it protects the larvae. And it will actually treat the larvae as if it were a parent. These chemicals have messed with this caterpillar's brain, and then what it does is it spins its own silk over the larvae, and it protects them. And it protects them until it literally dies. And we don't see any of the Pale King kids next to Bardoon, except, Hornet, who also uses silk. So that was interesting, But I wasn't done, because that fit, but I couldn't actually prove that Hornet came out of Bardoon, and we kind of know that she was with Hera. So I kept looking, because I had to find a wasp that would somehow mate or combine with a spider. And spiders, as we know, are some really interesting hunters, and they're really efficient at what they do. So it was pretty unlikely that I was going to find anything. And then I found something. Polysphincta gutfreuden. Again, fuck you, I can't say these names. These scientific names are bullshit. I will put all this down there. But this is a parasitoid wasp that enslaves spiders. This wasp finds a spider in its nest. Yeah, Hera's in her nest. We know that. She's literally in the beast's den. And then it lays its eggs on it. And those larvae hatch, and they drink the fluids from the spider. Spider is a living host to this thing. And while it does that, the spider begins to change. Much like our caterpillar example, the spider's brain has changed from this. The spider begins to neglect its web. No longer cleans it. It doesn't make new one. It just stops. For whatever reason,